My time back in my home province was something that I probably couldn't have even dreamed of while I sat and rotted in that prison cell in the Imperial City. My adoptive father, Matthias Andis, and my best friend, Vinius Salis, would have been proud of the things that I've done. I know they would be, because I'm proud of my accomplishments. I may not have eliminated all evil from Tamriel, but I certainly did right many, many wrongs. Dagoth-Ur and Almsivi being the main ones. The heart of Lorkhan was too much trouble for us mortals. It would seem that the power of many of these Daedric princes have is too much. It's almost like the power they have was given to any random mortal, and what you got was a random outcome. Some are good, some are bad. Some somewhere in the middle. Wait, what good ones are there? Azura probably would be the number one, but as even for her, if you get on her bad side, she will come after you and make you regret it, just as any of the bad Daedric princes would. I suppose each of them requires a certain allegiance or point of view to gain their support. But the bad ones are really bad, just as bad as Dagoth-Ur was, and what he was planning to do. The difference is that Dagoth-Ur's power and his kingdom were already on Mundus, and not in some oblivion plane. Which means he was already here, and using his power to subvert and control. The Daedric princes have to somehow overcome the barrier that the covenant with Akatosh created to prevent invasion, but if one of them had had its home on Mundus, then we would have been in a lot of trouble. I don't know what the Nine Divines would have thought of my efforts to defeat Dagoth-Ur, but I am sure that they are smiling on me as well, as are all my ancestors, and even the one so-called god we Dwemer have left, Vivek. It appears to me that we go by Imperial, or Cyrodiilic history, for the most part that is. We are all members of the Third Cyrodiilic Empire, so it does make sense. But if we Dwemer were to go by our own history, it would have started out in the Somerset Isles, with a group of our ancient ancestors called the Chimer. This would have been in the Merethic era, which lasted 2,500 years. It means the age of Mer, my kind. Before that was the Dawn era, and no one could say for how long that lasted, but it was when Mundus was created, and the Eight Divines came to be. Mundus includes the world of Nirn that we live on, and its two moons, Massar and Secunda. Other worlds exist in the different planes of Oblivion. The Chimer was helped by Boethia, Mephala, and Azura to arrange themselves as a new distinct people from the other Mer of the Somerset Isles. Their culture, worship, and philosophies were completely different, and they didn't get along too well with those who didn't worship these Daedric princes, so they left. For the Chimer, the ancestors were elevated to such a position that they were second only to the worship of their gods. The Aldmer were the gold-skinned root race of the Somerset Isles that the Chimer descended from. Today, the Mer of the Somerset Isles are called the Altmer. These Mer are tall, gold-skinned, with brown, red, or blonde hair, who are very proficient with magic. They may not have changed much in terms of looks, but they are distinct from their ancestors, the Aldmer. The Chimer were led by the prophet Veloth and made their way to Morrowind, what was then called Resdain. Some call them the Velothi. When they reached their new home, they found that the only other inhabitants there were the Dwemer, who didn't use much of the surface, so they were able to coexist on the same land to a reasonable extent. They lived pretty much as the Ashlanders of today lived, which is a reason why sometimes the Ashlanders are referred to as the Velothi as well. Men began coming in the latter half of the Merethic era into Tamriel. There were two kinds of them, as this was over 1,000 years before the Redguard came to Hammerfell. These were the Needs and the Nords. The Needs were more widespread as they came first and were keen on settling wherever they could find a decent place to set up their new homes. From where? Who knows for sure, but most think from Atmora, the Nord continent far to the north of Tamriel. It is a frozen wasteland now, too cold for anyone, including the Nords, to live there. The Nords came later, and focused on settling Skyrim at first, and the war with the Falmer occupied their early history there. In the meantime, our people, the Chimer, had many small wars with the Needs, wars within Resdain as they attempted to settle parts of it, but they were repelled. It was their brethren, the Nords, that really gave us trouble. When the Merethic era ended, things began to change in Tamriel. It was named the First Era because it was now the time of men. They destroyed the Aelids in Cyrodiil and set up their first empire there. The Falmer in Skyrim had already been dealt with. The Snow Prince and the last battle with the Nords had taken place at the end of the Merethic era. Mer power in this time greatly waned, and many of our kind were destroyed. First the Falmer, then the Aelids, and finally the Dwemer. Even the Chimera were to go in the First Era, as you will soon see, but that is complicated, and it wasn't all that bad. In Resdayn at this time, Dwemer and Chimera relations soured, and the two often kept themselves apart, not quite as enemies, but not as friends either. Several incidents did occur, and some fighting broke out between them. Also, the Chimera were not unified either, and there was fighting and disputes all over the land between them. This went on for some centuries. The Dwemer thought the Chimera foolish for worshipping the Daedric princes, and the Chimera believed the Dwemer to be profane in their beliefs. They didn't worship the gods, they worshipped themselves and what they could create. Then the Nord invasions came. They were successful, mostly because the two Mer were not united in defense. After 50 years of invasions, the Nords dominated all of Resdayn. But then the Nord king died with no clear line of succession in the First Era, 389. And this started a long civil war within the Empire of Skyrim. With their power greatly weakened, Lord Indral Nerevar, who was named the Hortator of the Chimera people, which means war leader, made friends with Dumak Dwarf King, and the First Council was formed in 416. This was the beginning of the Great Houses of Resdayn, with the Dwemer as one house. It was to be a coalition between the two Mer. Together, the Chimera and the Dwemer houses, led by Lord Nerevar, drove the Nords out of Resdayn for good, but not without loss. The Nords had the power of the voice, and the powerful among them could cause much destruction. Once they were finally gone, the alliance made of the First Council lasted for centuries, but as time went on, relations between the two began to sour again, as the religious differences between the Chimera and Dwemer were too great. It was Vorin Dagoth who led the great Chimera house Dagoth, who was closest in relations to House Dwemer. He discovered a great secret through his friends with the Dwemer. The Dwemer had unearthed the heart of Lorkhan deep beneath Red Mountain. When Indral Nerevar was told of this, it led to heated discussions between him and King Dumak. The heart of Lorkhan is the heart of the dead god of the same name. With it, and with the Dwemer's lack of respect for any of the gods, who knows what they could use it for, but it was thought amongst the Chimera that this was a terrible portent. Azura then appeared to Lord Nerevar and told him that the Dwemer were creating what could be used as a weapon from the heart, a giant mechanical golem, the Nomidium. It was to be a new god for the Dwemer, and with it, there could be no stopping them. Kagranak, the chief tonal architect and high priest of the Dwemer, was experimenting with the heart to extract its divine power with the focus to improve the Dwemer race. He had created 3 tools, Sunder, Keening, and Wraithguard, to work with the heart. Lord Nerevar had his council, the 3 advisors, who were the Tribunal before they came to apotheosis. This consisted of his closest friend Vivek, Amalexia, his wife, and Sothasil, who was the wisest and most learned among the Chimera. Together they sent an ultimatum to King Dumak: stop the work on the heart of Lorkhan, or face destruction. The king of the Dwemer, not knowing of the discovery of the heart of Lorkhan, nor what Kagranak was up to, denied it all. The 2 races of Mer then went to war. This is where it gets confusing and where wild stories weave in and out. Some claim that House Dagoth allied with House Dwemer against the other Chimera houses. Some say that House Dagoth or House Dwemer brought in Nords, Orcs, and Khajiit forces to aid them. All that is known for sure is that the Chimera won the war at Red Mountain. I do not believe that House Dagoth turned against the other Chimera houses. Vorin Dagoth was known to be a great and loyal friend to Lord Nerevar. Some claim that he was a traitor to House Dagoth. But I think the Tribunal Temple altered the history of the events to make it seem that House Dagoth were disloyal from the start. For the events that follow make it quite plain why. Why so many sources claim differently, I cannot say. Some claim that the main armies of the Dwemer were led away by deception, others that it was a last stand battle of the Dwemer and all their allies. Some claimed that the Nord-Orc armies had forced the Dwemer to side with the Chimera again, and the real enemy was the reborn Nord king Wolfhearth, who claimed the heart of Lorkhan, whom the Nords revere as their mightiest god and call him Shor. Regardless, with the remaining forces present, a fierce battle was fought at Red Mountain. Again, sources differ on who or what happened to Lord Nerevar, but he was victorious, and somehow King Dumak was killed. This final battle was fought in the Heart Chamber itself, deep within Red Mountain. At the end, Kagranak used the tools on the heart. He wanted to use its power against the Chimera, but it was then that all the Dwemer on Nirn disappeared. It is thought that Kagranak did not know how exactly to manipulate the heart, and instead of destroying the Chimera, it affected his own people. Lord Nerevar was injured and told his loyal friend Borin Dagoth to keep the tools to the heart safe, while he left the Heart Chamber and conferred with his council on what to do next. Again, sources say many different things, but I believe that it happened like this. While Vorin Dagoth kept the tools safe, Lord Nerevar and his council decided against the use of the tools. The council even vowed that they would never use the tools on the heart. But in the end, it was decided the best course of action was to destroy them. But just in case, they began summoning Azura to ask her wisdom on what to do with the tools. But while the summoning ritual was underway, a weakened Nerevar was poisoned by his council, who intended to take the tools and use them for themselves. Though the ritual was interrupted and never completed, Azura appeared to them anyway. Seeing Nerevar now dead at the hands of his most trusted and loved advisors, and knowing that they were planning on breaking their vow not to use the tools, in her anger, she cursed the three of them, and all of the Chimera race. Instead of being golden skin, they were now the color of ash with red eyes. She also damned them with a warning that one day, Lord Nerevar will reincarnate and return to destroy them. Despite this, the council made their way back into the Heart Chamber and defeated Vorin Dagoth, who fled deeper into Red Mountain. They took the tools, and Sothasil studied them for several years. He came to understand how to use them. Despite the Dwemer now gone from the world for misusing the tools, he was able to successfully use the tools on the heart to bestow divine power upon himself, Almalexia, and Vivek. They now became the new gods of Resdayn, otherwise known as Almsivi, which is a combination of all three names, Almalexia, Sothasil, and Vivek. Typically, though, they were referred to as the Tribunal, and they would create their own new religion based upon the ancestor worship of the Chimera and their heroes who were now called saints, as well as their new gods replacing the old Daedric princes. Indral Nerevar was now a saint of the Dunmer. The new religion was the Tribunal Temple. Resdayn was renamed Morrowind, and the Chimera now named the Dunmer. They were told by the Tribunal to not fear the change in their appearance, but to embrace it. This was the new people of Morrowind. They were a new superior Mer, with their own gods that lived among them and could be seen and felt as if they were any mortal. The Tribunal would protect the Dunmer people of Morrowind from all outside threats, as well as those from within. House Dagoth was eliminated, and Vorin Dagoth was not seen again as he was, because when he next appeared, he was to be called Dagoth-Ur. This is another disputed case of when he was named this. But suffice to say, he was no longer known as his former name. It was assumed that while Indral Nerevar and his council were convening and then attempted to summon Azura, that Vorin Dagoth used the tools on the heart to draw some of its divine essence to himself. This is why he was not ever able to be killed. He would continue to return every time his body was struck down. But at that time in the First Era, and possibly much of the Second Era, it was assumed that his body became incorporeal, and took a long time to return to solid form. Perhaps his link to the heart was not yet strong. Then we have over 3,500 years of rule by the Tribunal, who in the late Second Era could no longer return to the heart to renew their powers because Dagoth-Ur had grown too powerful and had a whole host of followers to fight them by then. In a surprise ambush, Dagoth-Ur sent Almsivi fleeing. This led to the steady decline in power of Almsivi. Despite launching yearly raids into Red Mountain by Temple warriors to eradicate the forces of Dagoth-Ur, it never succeeded, and the Tribunal gods weakened to the point where they can no longer defend Morrowind as they used to. This is how Tiber Septim, or Talos, as the Nords call him, came to take Morrowind at the end of the Second Era. The other houses didn't know what to do since for the first time, the Tribunal did not take leadership in the war, as they would have in previous eras. Only House Redrun had stood against the legions and fought several inconclusive skirmishes with them along the border. Knowing that they could not stop the Imperial legions of the Third Empire, the Tribunal decided on an armistice with the new Emperor. For the first time, one of the Cyrodiilic empires had taken Morrowind in as one of its provinces. Never before had they been able to do this because of the power of the Tribunal who stood as protectors of the Dwemer people. The Second Empire, the Riemann Empire, took all of Tamriel, but Morrowind. In the Third Era, year 417, Dagoth had his best minions go further. The Ash Vampires, as they were called, defeated Almalexia and Sothisil in battle, and took the tools Keening and Sunder. It was then that Dagoth was able to begin work on the Second Numidium, or what he called the Akulakan. He did this despite not having Wraithguard to protect him from the harm that Keening and Sunder would cause due to their immense power. Vivek held Wraithguard, but it seems that Dagoth did not care to go after it. The rest of the story was pretty much summed up in the current time of the Third Era, year 428, with my returning to Vvardenfell in the last seed, which is the 9th month of the year 427. So what about my story? I certainly would be more than a footnote in the history of Tamriel. Without me, the Nerevarine, Dagoth would have conquered all of Tamriel. His version of the Numidium, the Akulakan, would have been able to sweep aside all opposition, and the Blight would be everywhere. His sixth house would have been the new priesthood of Tamriel, and all sentient races would be completely dominated and deformed, as was his temple doctrine. So yes, I'm quite happy with everything that I have accomplished. The Tribunal Temple will still exist to a certain degree, but Almsivi will take their place as just saints of the Dwemer people who protected Morrowind. Since I am the Patriarch of Vvardenfell, I will make it happen. Already, much of the priesthood has responded well to the changes, though I know it will take some time for it all to sink in and be implemented across the province. This all happened because, unlike Almalexia, Vivek at least had the wisdom to acknowledge me as the reborn Indral Nerevar, and that everything the temple dissidents had been saying was true. If he hadn't, then I do not know if I could have succeeded, or at the least, perhaps I could have gained all three tools, even Wraithguard by force, and be branded as the most wanted Myrrh in all of Morrowind. Vivek could have lived on for a time as Almalexia did, all while his mind fell apart, but he was better than that. Now all of Morrowind looks to people like me and the new king for direction. I hope we can steer it in the right path. As for King Helseth, well, he's not exactly a nice person, is he? He tried to have me executed upon first hearing about me, and his history with people he perceived as a threat both here in Morrowind and in High Rock, where he previously lived, has become well known. Then with the way he ascended to become king of Morrowind, with the deaths of both the previous king and his successor, it is clear what kind of a Myrrh we are talking about. Regardless, this is a delicate time for Morrowind. So much has happened in the last year, and I will not tempt fate by trying to have King Helseth removed, though he most certainly should be. Instead, I will approach him as many times as it takes to get him to change Morrowind's laws on slavery. It is the one thing he alone has the power to control, and if he should make it illegal, then that is at least one good thing that this Myrrh could do in his entire God's-forsaken life. But as for my life, and what I will do and where I will go from here, well, I plan to stay around in Morrowind for the next few years to help, of course, as I said, but I will be very interested to see what happens to Vivek. But afterwards, once things seem settled, I think it will take a few years and travel. To where? I cannot say. Not exactly. But after my stay in Solstein, it is clear that there is much of Nirn that I haven't seen and would like to. At least, I was able to convince Falco Galenis to take the job as factor of the East Empire Company in Solstein. That was another title that I just didn't want. Last I heard before I left Solstein, he was talking about having a nice big home built for himself in Ravenrock. As for my other titles other than Patriarch, I will see about finding replacements for myself. I am the Nerevarine, so at least the Dwemer will listen to me, and most likely with little argument. The non-Dwemer will at least have heard of what the Nerevarine is, and will probably follow my orders, even when they go against whatever organizational rules I will break or bend in order to get someone appointed to my place. I am, as now, the head of the Tribunal Temple in Vardenfell, the head of House Redarin, the leader of the Fighters Guild, the Thieves Guild, the Morag Tong, and a high-up rank in the Imperial Legion, and a mid-level mage in the Mages Guild. In the so-called Imperial Cult, I was just a helper there, and not anyone of any significant rank. I think I'll keep my position as Patriarch, and as leader of House Redarin, as well as my rank in the Imperial Legion, at least for the foreseeable future. That way at least I will have both the ear of my people, and a voice in the Empire. I could have dueled the leader of the Imperial Legion in Vardenfell for his place, but that was another position that I just didn't want to take. By that point, it was just too much as it was. Also, I will always be the Nerevarine, and Azura's champion for as long as I'm able to live, which might be a long, long time if I'm able to take care of myself and not fall in battle. Age and disease will not overtake me, due to curing the negative aspects of the corpus disease that I have. Nor can I spread this form of disease, nor will it affect my mind or mutate my body. I am near immortal. I will invite my friend Julian to come along with Shani and I. She has already declared her joy at the thought of traveling and seeing far-off places and people. Perhaps one day she will decide to marry me. In the meantime, I will keep the dagger on me at all times. Well, nearly all times, so long as we are together. You do remember the dagger she gave me, telling me it was to be used against her heart if I were to act as her previous lovers did? Heh. It was more of a symbol of her giving me her heart, completely, than anything else. But it means a lot to me, and it will remain among my possessions wherever we go. Julian has been a good and trusted friend, even though we had a rough patch or two where he thought I was a traitor to his people because of my Imperial connection. Oh yes, the Blades. I haven't heard from them in a while. I suppose that is the last organization that I am a part of. Well, to be correct, it was the very first. Too bad I cannot talk about it to anyone, though. If I ever hear from the Emperor to do some task, then I will gladly do it. He has given me a new life. No, he's given me life. A life I intend to live to its fullest. As to where we might end up one day, well, I hear that Akavir is an interesting place. Though how one gets over there, that might be an adventure in of itself. But if the conditions are right, I might just try it. Yes, it's my next project, and coming soon. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.